Hello, my dear Facebook Live enjoyers, and this is Raymond Aaron, New York Times top 10 best-selling author, and I'm doing a very special Facebook Live. I'm going to take you behind the scenes of my brand new podcast. It's called Respark Your Life, and it's the podcast to ignite the fire to live life on your terms. The podcast to live life on your terms. And you can register for it. There's a shortcut URL, aaron.com, aaron.com/respark. aaron.com/respark. And I'm going to take you behind the scenes and allow you to watch me make a new episode. And the new episode is called You Can't Just Tell at the Time. You just can't tell at the time. You just can't tell at the time. And this episode will be coming out in a month or so. I'm ahead of schedule. But you're going to actually come behind the scenes and watch me do it raw. And I might make a mistake and leave a space so that I can edit it later, but you'll see it all raw. And then if you subscribe, a month or two from now, you'll actually see that episode coming out or hear that episode coming out. And you'll say, oh yes, I was behind the scenes when Raymond did it. So, are you ready? I'm going to click start. No, I've already clicked start. I'm going to click start over here on my GarageBand so that I can record it. You just can't tell at the time. Okay, here we go. Hello and no, I don't want to say hello. I'm already partway through. That was silly. Okay, here we go. And the title of this fascinating episode of Respark Your Life is You Just Can't Tell at the Time. You just can't tell at the time. You think you can tell, but you just can't tell at the time. And I'm going to start by retelling you a Taoist story that you probably have heard before about a farmer whose only horse ran away. And everyone thought, oh, that's bad. But then the next day, he returned with three other wild horses. And so everyone said, that's good. And then his son decided to try to ride one of the new untamed horses, and the horse threw him, and he fell and broke his knee. And everyone said, that's bad. And then the next day, the military came through that village to I'm leaving a space now because I made a mistake. And the next day, the military came through the town to conscript any young lad who was healthy and strong. But they didn't conscript, that means force into the army, that young lad because he had a broken knee. And everybody said, that's good. And so you think that the horse running away is bad, and then bringing other horses is good, and then the kid hurting his knee is bad, and then the military bypassing him is good. We think we can tell at the time. But you know the word myopic? Myopic means you just see a little bit. You just see a tiny piece of the grand scheme, and you think you know the whole scheme, but you don't. And I'm going to tell you two wonderful stories that you don't know of. You probably have heard that story, but you don't know these two stories because they happened to me. Respark Your Life is about lessons from my life that you probably have never heard of, that I learned from, and now you can learn from, so that you can respark your life and ignite the fire to live life on your terms. So I was holding a workshop, and I asked a particular question about something that had happened in someone's life. And this man stood up, started crying, and sat down. Very strange. And then his wife stood up and said, let me explain. My husband has been working for Ford Motor Company for almost 40 years. He is a devoted Ford Motor Company employee. He's been driving only Ford cars, and he's been telling everyone how much he loves Ford, and he takes work home in the evenings so that he can work on Ford duties, and he takes work home on the weekends so he can do Ford stuff. He's a total Ford man through and through. And then just a few days ago, he came to work, and everyone in his division was called in, and they were all fired. Everybody, the whole division had been shut down. And they didn't say, by the way, thank you for giving us 40 years of loyalty. Of course, they were obligated to give him some money, but they gave him the money they were required to give. And that was it. They were told to give up your key and go away. And he called me from his office crying because he was so upset that his life had been destroyed. He gave everything to Ford, and they seemed to have ignored him at the very end. He was distraught. And so I said, this is the wife talking still. So I said to him, listen, our granddaughter has a swimming lesson today, and I always pick her up, but she loves you. She loves her granddad. If you surprised her by picking her up because you've never picked her up for swimming class because you're always working, why don't you pick her up and take her to swimming class? And so he agreed, even though he was mopey. And he picked her up, and sure enough, the granddaughter said, oh, Granddaddy, I'm so happy you picked me up. Oh, this is amazing. I'm so happy. And he dutifully took her to swimming, and he sat inside the enclosure, fully dressed with his business suit on and his street shoes, just with his head in his hands, looking down, moping, oh my gosh, I gave so much to Ford, and this is what they did to me, like he was just regurgitating the same story. And as he was looking down, he saw on the bottom of the pool, in the deep end where he was sitting, a young boy, just a few years old, lying on his back on the bottom of the pool, waving his arms and legs uselessly, and just on the bottom of the pool, obviously going to be drowning within a few seconds. And so without thinking, he dove into the swimming pool with his suit on and his street shoes on, and that noise and commotion aroused the lifeguard, who turned around, saw what was happening, raced over to the deep end, and my husband, this is the same lady telling the story, my husband lifted this boy up, and the lifeguard grabbed the boy from his arms and gave him artificial resuscitation and revived his life. And my husband that night said to me, do you know, sweetie, I thought I was working at Ford Motor Company for all these decades. I wasn't. God just put me on a shelf till he needed me to save that boy's life. I thought I was working at Ford. I thought all those deadlines and reports were important. I thought all those issues that I had to deal with were part of my life, but they were just part of being put on a shelf until God needed me to save that little boy's life. And so in that instant, he reimagined his entire life. He thought his life was good. He thought he was doing a good job for Ford, but really he was just on a shelf waiting to save that boy's life. And all of a sudden, he didn't feel bad any longer because he had this tiny view of, I'm a Ford employee. And then he had this gigantic spiritual view that I am a spiritual entity having a human existence for a few decades on a shelf at Ford waiting for God to need me. And that's what I mean. You just don't know at the time. You have proof that you're working at Ford. Heck, you've got pay stubs from Ford for the last several decades. You could prove it. You have a key. You can prove it. And yet, maybe you weren't. And now I'm going to tell you a story from my life. And I think you'll enjoy this because you'll see. You'll be surprised, actually. So the story starts in grade 5. And I failed grade 5. I was a nuisance in class, and I wasn't getting good marks, and I wasn't very studious, and I wasn't good in sports, and I failed. I didn't like my teacher, Miss White, and she absolutely didn't like me. She sent me to the principal's office a lot, and he actually strapped me. It's not legal these days, but it was then. He'd hold my hand in one of his hands, and then he took a 12-inch long ruler and whapped my palm with that ruler, and it really, really stung, and it hurt, and I cried, no, stop. And I was sent to the principal's office, I don't know, it seemed to me every week, but probably wasn't that often. And then when I came back after the summer, trudging back to grade 5, I was told that I was promoted to grade 6. I asked my mother if she did it. She claimed she didn't have anything to do with it, but somehow I didn't fail. So I thought I'd failed. I had evidence that I'd failed, but I hadn't. And then when I got to grade 6, I had the best teacher I ever had in my life, Mr. Mahay, Mr. Frank Mahay, M-I-H-A-Y. And he was such a loving teacher, and he engrossed us so deeply. He was so wonderful. And at the end of grade 6, he went into the principal's office and said, "Sir, there are some students in my class that are so advanced, so wise, that I think they should skip a year and go right from grade 6 to grade 8. And the principal was quite startled and said, "Oh, really? Which ones?" And my teacher dropped the entire class list on the principal's desk and said, "Every one of them is getting spectacular marks." And the principal agreed. This is the same principal that approved my failing in grade 5, and then he approved my skipping in grade 6. I was so advanced. In fact, the whole class was so advanced because of our wonderful teacher. And I did go directly from grade 6 to grade 8. And at the end of grade 8, I entered an oratory contest, a speech, and I lost. I thought I did a good job. I gave a talk on nuclear physics. I thought everybody would give a talk on nuclear physics. Don't all 8-year-olds give talks on nuclear physics? But I lost, and so that was bad. Failing in grade 5 was bad. Skipping in grade 6 was good. Failing the oratory contest in grade 8 was bad. And then I get to this big high school, whole different school I'd never been to before, in grade 9, and all of a sudden my marks were in the 50s. Luckily, I got 90 in math, and that pulled me up to 66, but really, all my marks were in the 50s. I was so bad. And I thought I was bad. I thought I was dumb. I thought maybe skipping was an accident, and really the grade 5 model and the grade 9 model were correct, that I was really dumb. And then I was dumb in grade 10. I got 66 again. And then in grade 11, I suddenly lost some weight, grew a few inches taller, and got a 76 average first-class honors. I thought, oh my gosh, maybe I'm smart. And then in grade 12, I was again smart. And when I was in high school, there was a grade 13 before you get to university. And my marks were so high in grade 13 that I won 2 scholarships, and I could have studied physics or English. I could have studied Einstein or Shakespeare. I was really good and really smart. And so you can see my life seesawed back and forth. And then I went to university. In the first year of university, I couldn't figure out anything. And yet, I graduated I then completed the first year of university with first-class honors. And I graduated with first-class honors. And then I got a high-paying job in mathematics and physics and computers. I got bored, quit, and I started a soft drink company to compete with Coca-Cola, which failed. So then I started a cosmetics distribution company, which failed. So then I launched a small chain of women's weight-reducing salons, which failed. And then I started a private eye firm, which failed. And then I started a foreign car importing company, which failed. And between all of these failed entrepreneurial ventures, I got high-paying salary jobs in math and computers and physics to pay off my debt, got bored, and went back into business again, which failed. And so I thought I was failing from age 19 to age 39. I had a 20-year history of failing. And then when I started my professional speaking career and everybody wanted me to coach them, the only reason I'm such a good coach is because I failed in so many businesses. I failed in so many industries. And so you just can't tell at the time. Who knew? When I failed in so many businesses, that was the successful apprenticeship program. And then when I failed in giving a speech, coming second, that was the success to come when I was 39 and started my public speaking career. And then my success in being declared a genius in the field of mathematics had no impact whatsoever. I don't use math at all. And then my success of writing a calculus textbook when I graduated from university that was made compulsory at the University of Toronto, that success actually did matter, but not in calculus, in helping other people write books. And so sometimes I had failures, which then became a success. Sometimes I had failures, which actually were failures. Sometimes I had successes, like being declared a genius in math, which actually never mattered later to anybody. And sometimes I had successes that were amazing successes. You just can't tell at the time. You just never know. And so the next time something horrible happens to you, the loss of a loved one, the loss of a job, look for the silver lining, not just to be an optimist, but because if you think of the Taoist story of the farmer's son, if you think of the guy who worked at Ford Motor Company for all those decades, you think you know what's going on. You think you know whether things are good or bad. You think that if you fail importing foreign sports cars and fail as a private eye and fail competing with Coca-Cola in the soft drink industry and fail importing foreign sports cars, you feel that you're a failure. But yet that was an apprenticeship program to make me a great coach. So you never know what's in store. And really you don't see life. You see a weeny tiny bit of life. It's as if you're looking through a microscope at a tiny, 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 tiny piece of the puzzle, trying to make a generalization about the whole puzzle. And you can't, because you don't know the whole puzzle. You can see the present and the past, but you can't see the future, and so you can't see the whole picture. It's like having a 1,000-piece jigsaw puzzle, picking up one piece and saying, this whole puzzle is bad. And picking up another piece and saying, this whole puzzle is good. You just can't tell. And so what is the moral? What is the point? The point is, if you can't tell at the moment, then instead of declaring some things are good and some things are bad, and if something's good, you feel good, and if something's bad, you have to feel bad, and then later when you realize that you were wrong, that the bad was actually good or the good was actually bad, then you have to reconstruct everything and feel bad if you felt good before and feel good if you felt bad before. Instead of all that heartache, just think of everything as good. Because it usually turns out that not only is it good, it's actually the best thing that could have ever happened to you. The best thing that could have ever happened to you. That's my experience in my many decades of living on this particular planet. So respark your life by throwing away your imagination or your interpretation or your evaluation that a particular thing is bad, and see if you can think of it as good or even the best thing that could have ever happened to you. Thank you. I've just turned off my GarageBand. That was the end of my recording. It was 16 minutes, but I have to edit some of it out, so it'll probably come to 15 and a half minutes. And I'm recording this in mid-September, but I have a month or two already recorded, so this probably won't come out till November. And if you subscribe, AARON, aaron.com/respark, then you can hear it when it shows up. In the meantime, I love you. Please subscribe, because I love teaching, and I love teaching through this amazing medium of podcasting. Please join me. You can actually go to Spotify or Apple Podcast or Stitcher, if you happen to like one of those, and just search under Respark Your Life or search under Raymond Aaron, and you'll find it. And just download a few issues or subscribe. Thank you very much. Thank you, thank you, thank you.